It is my pleasure and honor to introduce the next speaker, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Senator Booker has been an early and strong advocate of the transformative power of blockchain technology to help power the American economy, democratize the internet, and provide opportunities for new communities to invest and participate in the purchase and exchange of assets. From the start, Dapper Labs' mission has been motivated by the many and varied ways this new technology is set to transform our lives, and we are all here today because we know blockchain is poised to be the biggest thing to happen to the internet since the iPhone. It will reshape how we use and interact with digital worlds, but for this technology to realize its real-world potential, it needs to be broadly adopted. Dapper was the pioneer of digital collectible NFTs and has worked to build consumer-facing experiences that allow people to interact with Web3 technology and familiar brands in a way that is easily accessible, secure, transparent, and fun. We're excited about our progress towards helping everyone understand, experience, and benefit from Web3 and realize the promise of blockchain. Senator Booker has also been outspoken about the need to balance innovation in this area with smart, measured regulation that protects consumers and prevents illicit behavior. There's growing bipartisan recognition of this, and as we discussed this morning in the recent executive order on digital assets, we saw a commitment from the administration to a whole-of-government approach to building a safe and secure ecosystem. We're thrilled to have Senator Booker here today to tell us about what's happening on the Hill and how our policymakers are approaching blockchain and where he sees the greatest potential. He will be joined by Teana Baker-Taylor, Chief Policy Officer for the Digital Chamber of Commerce.
What side do you want?
I'll be on the right.
Okay.
Which in political terms is difficult. I'd asked for Bruce Springsteen to come out too, but that music was.
Yeah, next time we'll get you Bruce. Okay.
So Teana, I know this is a conference and we're talking about crypto, but one of my biggest frustrations is that we have normalized mass carnage in our country, and we just had a shooting in Texas where over 10 children have died, and it shakes me. No other country, but countries at war like Ukraine, have this level of death and destruction on a daily basis, and these mass shootings are outrageous. So I want to express my grief and my hurt that a sacred place like a school has been attacked in this way, and I hope we as Americans don't just get thoughts and prayers, but begin to think about what we can do to prevent this from happening.
Hear, hear. Okay. So.
And you're a Texan.
I'm not a Texan. Do I look like a Texan?
No, you're not. You don't look like a Texan.
No,
Where are you from?
I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh, so's my mom. That's a great city.
Okay, so let's dig into it.
Yes, please.
Financial inclusion is one of your key priorities. And I'm wondering, in your view, do you think that the global financial system is becoming more or less inclusive, and what the role you see digital assets playing in that?
So I live I'm the only United States senator that lives in a low-income black and brown community, and I have been working since I was a city council person back in the 90s on issues of financial inclusion. And so the global financial markets have not served marginalized communities well at all. In fact, they've often been exploited by them, and you can drive around communities where you see, the subprime crisis. You can see the ravages of past government policies like redlining, or even just check cashing places and rapid refund places that are just exploiting folks that are there. Mm-hmm. And so crypto, to me at this point, is hopeful. There's things I see going on in this movement that encourage me, and one is just participation rates for underbanked and minorities. In fact, if you look at it, about 25%, about a quarter of all black Americans are engaged in cryptocurrencies. That's huge. 17% of Latinos, and 27% of people without a credit card are actually engaged in this area. And so that gives me a lot of hope about the possibilities, not just of cryptocurrencies, but really Web 3.0 in overcoming a lot of what I see continues to undermine the economic strength of communities like the one I live in.
Okay, so follow-up question to that. oftentimes we get questions around consumer protection. And so as those numbers grow in Black and brown communities around adoption, some of the concerns that are raised are around, are we putting potentially vulnerable people at risk? And do we need better consumer protection? And I will often ask, well, what does that mean to you? What does consumer protection mean to you? And I said this the other day, and it resonated with people, like, I don't want to be protected into being poor. Right. So, where is the line between ensuring that people have access and opportunity? Where does financial literacy lie within that? And what's our role to protect people? And where does that line draw between protecting people or, hindering them from access?
I want to say hallelujah, amen. I want to snap my fingers. If I was in the front row, I'd be lighting a match right now and holding up a lighter or my cell phone with you saying that, because it is that. I do believe in consumer protection. I've been actively working as a senator, as a mayor, as a city council person to protect my communities, my vulnerable communities, from exploitation or exclusion. And this is an ongoing fight, and we've seen government do the right thing, like the Community Reinvestment Act, trying to get banks that are present in community take deposits but are not investing in communities. Right. We've seen important steps that are taken to try to correct for the ills that exist. And it's still things I talk about. Web 2.0, it's why I live in a low-income community, when I turn on my computer and go surf the internet, I'm not seeing advertisements for certain financial products that just a few towns over in a Montclair or South Orange, people there might see. Yeah. But I agree with you on the other side of this, which is this idea that we're going to protect you so much that you're going to miss out on the opportunity, or for me, what is the exciting potential democratizing effect that could come from creating wider pathways of opportunity for marginalized communities. And that has got to be the hope here, is that we can do this in a way that expands opportunities, not patronizing or infantilizing communities who are very sophisticated. You and I probably have come from grandparents who made a way out of no way, made a dollar go further than anybody, frugal, smart, but we now live in communities that sometimes, in the nature of trying to protect you, they're excluding you from a tremendous amount of opportunity. And that's what I think we've got to be very aware of, and that we've got to more actively doing something about. Excellent. Okay.
I know that you were very excited, as were we of the Chamber, about President Biden's executive order.
You know what, let me add one more thing.
Okay.
Because this is a chance to vent to folks.
No,
New York Times had an article about this weekend about Wells Fargo. Now remember, Wells Fargo in 2020 had a multi-million-dollar settlement for their discrimination. So a lot of communities of color look at these big financial institutions for what their history shows them to be doing things that discriminate against vulnerable communities. Now, it makes no sense to me that people like Wells Fargo would do that, because I can take you from Harvard Business School studies to McKinsey consulting firm studies that show diverse teams are better teams. And so if you're trying to get the business of the Black community, not to hire people, not to have folks feel connections, you're actually hurting your own company. But here we have them in Wells Fargo in the New York Times again for creating a sham, fake interviews to say that they interview people, Black and brown people, and yet again getting in trouble. And so these things drive this continued narrative that, unfortunately, there are enough facts over the history of this country. I can't tell you the story of Blacks not getting veterans benefits that helped to open up the GI Bill, helped to open up new opportunities, expanding the middle class in this country. Blacks were actively excluded. Agricultural loans. There was overt discrimination going that forced Blacks off of land that today is valued at billions of dollars, that people in the same communities. So we could go through the financial institutions up until the 1970s overtly were excluding opportunity that helped to build wealth in this country but denied to African Americans. It's one of the reasons why Black Americans have 1/10 of the wealth of white Americans.
Well, it's generational wealth.
It's generational wealth. Literally my family, to buy a home in 1969 in New Jersey, the state that I now represent as a senator, were denied buying houses in areas with great public schools where houses really appreciate. They had to get a white couple to pose as them to buy the house, thanks to this great group of Blacks and whites who were trying to fight this real estate steering. On the day of the closing, after the white couple put a bid on the house, And the bid was accepted. The white couple didn't show up. My dad did it. And a volunteer lawyer, Marty Friedman, walked into the real estate agent's office. And even then, this institution would not give up. The real estate agent gets up, punches my dad's lawyer in the face, sings a Doberman Pinscher on my dad. After a lot of rigmarole, our family moves into this incredible town, as my father used to call us, the 4 raisins in a tub of sweet vanilla ice cream. But imagine this, that's our history, going up overtly into the 1970s. But then you continue to have examples like Wells Fargo, examples like banks not loaning to businesses. I've seen study after study of academics that going into banks with the same paperwork, but a black picture versus a white picture, and getting entirely different terms. And so it's no surprise to me that African Americans and Latinos are turning to a world that is a decentralized world that they view is not about these big institutions, but they hope will be a more level playing field and can disintermediate these institutions in creative ways, whether it's the swipe fees from credit cards, whether it is remittances back to for immigrants back to home countries. And so for me, yes, I am excited about this. Is what draws me in. I feel a little wariness because even in my short time in the Senate, I was a person that came to the United States Senate so angry about things that minority communities used to do. Like my grandfather, I think this might be the first time I've admitted this publicly, my grandfather ran numbers, he did the lottery back then, ran numbers in Detroit. Now the lottery is government controlled,
Sure.
and it's a huge boom. So a lot of industries that are illegal, like marijuana, for example, suddenly they start shifting. My time as senator, from the time I got here, was we've got to expunge people's records. We got to use this tax dollars from this billion-dollar industry, reinvest it into the communities. We got to do all these things to create more opportunities for black and brown people. And that was the promise. Everybody said, oh, this is going to help so much. Well, surprise, surprise. African Americans and Latinos and women, frankly, make up a very small part of this now multi-billion-dollar and growing industry. And one of the things when I meet with black entrepreneurs, one of the big things they say about this industry is how hard it is for them to get access to capital. So this is the kind of suspicion that is justified often about looking at these institutions, but on the flip side of that, it's one of the reasons why I'm hopeful that maybe this space, we can write rules of the game in a way that protect against the things we're afraid of, consumer exploitation, fraud, a lot of these things, but that can create a new frontier in Web 3.0 that finally gets us to that dream of King and others, that this is not about the color of your skin, but the content of your character, the grit and innovation of your mind. And that to me is exciting. And that's why I've plopped myself in this space, especially from the regulatory standpoint, to try to make sure that these voices of the marginalized, excluded, those who, as Ralph Ellison will say, have been rendered invisible, if we can make sure that this is a playing field that is far more inclusive and far more equal.
Yeah.
I'm in a venting mood today.
Well, look, hey, I put my questions down because let's just riff, right?
Yes, I love
All
that,
right.
Teana.
So, I think one of the things that causes regulators some concern is around the removal of that intermediary. The intermediary is supposed to help manage risk. The intermediary is supposed to provide a safety net. But as you've just described, and I have the same experience with my family, that intermediary for people that look like us is not trusted, right? And is often the exploiter. And I think one of the things that I find most incredible about this space, and people, think it's just, vernacular that we throw around, but that democratization means that if I apply for a job and I'm a coder, you don't know what color my skin is. If my code is good, I get the job. If I settle a transaction or I initiate a transaction, it's immediate. There's no one in the middle that can stop that payment or that can stop the purchase of that house. It's final. And so I think some of those things scare people because there isn't that safety net. There isn't the ability to reverse that. But then I think at some point, people feel like they want to have sovereignty over their future and over their finances. And I do think financial literacy comes into that. That's important. Making sure that everybody has access to the internet so that they can access Web3 is important. But I also think that we're at this pivotal moment where the status quo is uncomfortable. And I think that these two things can coexist together. Stablecoins is a great example of that. minority-owned businesses especially can achieve payment services at more affordable rates. And deposits in minority depository institutions from some of these stablecoin institutions or these issuers, I think is a really powerful way to get money back into these economies. But we're facing some friction, right? Because we do need to have some rules in place.
Yes. And by the way, I've talked to so many great innovators. Here at a time, I've created some really good relationships in Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street that got bombed, one of the most horrific, in fact, I think it's the first aerial bombing that ever happened years before Pearl Harbor in our country, was the bombing of this black community that was creating great business and wealth. And now I have some of these same entrepreneurs talking to me about, well, what if some of these communities, I live again in a majority minority city, over 80% black and Latino, what if they were able to start their own currency or do things that created a bit more circulation in their own community? The innovations that I'm hearing in this space are so exciting to me. We were driving over here, my staff was almost like in a competition telling new examples of the potential for democratizing all of this. What does it mean for women who are, as my chief of staff was telling me, who are facing sexual assault from their spouse, their ability to access resources in a different way that's harder to track and the like.
Great example of where privacy is important.
Yes.
Privacy does not mean you're doing anything wrong. If you need to go off the grid because you're running for your life,
yes,
that's important. Women raising money,
right,
talking about access to capital.
Yes.
It's really difficult for women to raise money.
And it gets back to this spiritual thing about, when I look at you, do I see your worth? Do I see your potential? And you talk to, especially, a lot of the minority women in my community, their whole life they've been doubted, they've been underestimated. And I remember when I was a big Web 2.0 early adopter. And so one of the things I wanted to do in the city was, again, I was preaching this back a decade plus ago, disintermediate these big banks. So I brought micro lenders in. They were making $5,000 loans to entrepreneurs, all of them women of color. And their returns, their loan repayment rates were better than any bank in our town or any of the big banks, because they understood that the things that those banks measure for creditworthiness were not applicable to communities like ours. And so I tell you, I hear a lot of patronizing things about this crypto space. And I'm with people on the real concerns we should look for. But I am tired of people not seeing the worth or the value or the genius that exists in often minority communities and giving them real pathways to manifest that so that we can finally close the wealth gap. And because it's hard for me to sit around a Congressional Black Caucus table. I'm one of the few senators who's ever, the fourth black person ever popularly elected to the United States Senate. Very rarely have they been going over to the House, but we've had a CBC for some time now, since the 1970s. And when I go over there, I sometimes sit around this circle of legends. And it's very hard for me, and I got very emotional during the passing of John Lewis, to see these great titans who handed off to my generation advancements in civil rights, advancements in voting rights. They were closing the wealth gap between blacks and whites as well. But what's happened in the time of my lifetime, where we're seeing slippages in civil rights, slippages in voting rights, and some people would say slippage, Cory, is too soft of a term, but we're seeing, but also with the black-white wealth gap, has actually gone back to what it was since before I was born. And the problem is, right now, we have a nation that has, over my lifetime, if you have wealth and capital, you are creating more wealth and capital. If you're locked out from avenues towards wealth and capital, we have seen the disparities in wealth overall, forget black and white, have grown dramatically because we're creating systems that lock people. I was stunned when I saw a measurable indice, which is called social mobility. For us to fall behind the classist nation of England, that they're more socially mobile than we are. And so if we don't think about this, and again, the language I'm using is it's not inappropriate, it's inadequate, because it almost creates this us-them atmosphere. But there is no us-them. There is only us. And in America, when you create wealth in communities that have not been afforded those opportunities, it has a multiplier effect for everyone. To not allow certain communities to have the same access to education, the same access to capital, the same access to property, when you erase those avenues, you don't just impoverish them. We are all impoverished as a result of it. And so I've been looking to technology from the time I was in the 80s playing my Atari and in television as something that afforded new possibilities. And so this space now is so precious to me. And I think, and this is why I work closely with Debbie Stabenow, I'm on the Ag Committee, and right now we're just not regulating a space that to me, as a patriot, I am a fierce competitor, former Stanford football player. The older I get, the better I was. But what I worry about is that we are not creating predictable rules for crypto here, and we're losing opportunity to other nations who I compete with in my mind, compete with every single day.
Yep.
And so I think we've got to get the regulation right.
All right, let me put you on the spot.
Yeah, please.
CFTC, should they have more jurisdiction?
Yes. In fact, hell yes.
Okay.
It's clearly, Ethereum, Bitcoin are the majority of this market. They're clearly commodities. They don't fall under, in my opinion, under the SEC jurisdiction. And so we need to clarify that. And I think what my staff, who's working with our chairwoman on, Debbie Stabenow, is doing a good job, I think, there. I know you had two of my friends, Senator Lummis and Senator Gillibrand. They have a broader bill that they're working on. I'm hoping to make some contributions on that to, again, ensure issues of equity, inclusion, and the like. That there's a lot of hopefulness in this space. And what I love, because I am tired about our culture of contempt in America, where we don't even want to listen to each other until we know what tribe you're in. I'm very happy that this technology space is a far more bipartisan space, and there's opportunities for us to do the right thing here. And inaction is bad, but overaction, I've seen, again, I'm a big technologist, believer in technology, leave Newark mayor, come here, and I get to the Senate, and I just start seeing everywhere you see innovation, government regulating wrongly, like 23andMe, which was doing really creative things to let you know your own DNA. Well, the FDA was putting the kibosh on them with overregulation. The drone industry, which other countries like France were using to fix poles and to do mine surveys. The FAA was issuing no licenses except for the movie industry. God forbid we live without our entertainment. But I said to the head of the FAA in an oversight committee, I said, look, if you guys were around during the time of Orville and Wilbur Wright, we would have never got planes off the ground. And so that's what I'm worried about here. You hear some people in this area that want to put the kibosh on it and not allow us to innovate. And in the tech world, we understand this, which is you try, you don't get it necessarily right, but you keep trying, you keep innovating until something comes together. That's the way the early internet had the freedom to do. So I want to be in this space to make sure we do protect against the fears, the legitimate fears of exploitation, of fraud, abuse that are out there. But I'm really worried that we don't over-regulate in a way that prevents innovators, technologists. Again, I see innovation every day in low-income communities in America. I mean, dear God, some of the best innovators are there. Just surviving is often an act of innovation. I want to see that we keep the space such that these innovators can apply their genius and help create experiences where more and more people in America can thrive and have their shot at American dream.
Last question.
Yes.
What do you need from us? What can we do to help you get your arms around everything that's happened in this space? What can we do to help you move the needle on the Hill? What can we do?
Yeah, well,
How can we help you?
I just think that, again, we are all us. When people look at government and say, it's government's bad, or I'm worried about government, I'm sorry, government is you. And to surrender the space where policy is being made, that's what Martin Luther King used to always say, is what we have to repent for is not just the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. You cannot leave this space to hope for the best things to happen. You've got to lean in, you've got to engage, you've got to help educate senators and congresspeople about this space. I really think that what we need more and more, not just in the crypto space, but in so many painful spaces like the one that's going on in Texas right now, I cannot just point fingers at the so-called bad people. I have trouble even saying that. But I really want us all to start not looking to who to blame, but taking more responsibility. This is our nation. We are at a terrible crossroads right now, from going to doubling down on divisiveness, cultures of contempt, demonizing our own government, which is like demonizing your own hand or parts of your own body. I just ask everybody here, the greatest form of patriotism is not voting. The greatest form of participation is engaging in the destiny of your nation by getting off the couch. Democracy is not a spectator sport, and getting in the arena and making your contributions to make this a more perfect union.
Senator Booker, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Teana.